you for joining me today. My name is David, and this is a real brief episode just to give kind of an update on the state of what's going on with me and therefore the podcast. There hasn't been any episodes in a few weeks, and I wanted to at least put something out because I did say that if you don't hear from me for a while, I probably died. And I know that's kind of morbid, but I don't mean it like I took myself out. I mean like I had a heart attack or something, catastrophic happened. That's the only way that I would disappear. If it's been like 2 months and you haven't heard an episode, that's probably what happened. But otherwise, I would say I'm ending the podcast and at least put out like one last episode. But really, it's a combination of things. I've been not feeling very well. I've had a few bouts of kind of mild colds and virus stuff. Thankfully, I really haven't gotten like truly hardcore sick in a long, long time, like since before COVID. So very thankful for that, but I've kind of slipped with a lot of my discipline regimens. So my body is a little more susceptible these days to what my wife and kids bring home from school. But I also found out that I was not going to be able to do the interview with Yeshua, which would have happened earlier this month. And I don't want to go into reasons why just for privacy reasons. But, that was kind of one of those things where I told myself ahead of time, don't put stock in that. Don't let yourself be upset or disappointed if it doesn't happen. And, in the moment I was like, this is totally fine. I understand. But obviously over time, the more I think about it, it's kind of a bummer. Yeah, I wanted to talk to Yeshua and ask all these really probing questions. But here's how I think our higher consciousness works. It's always carving a path for us based on what is exciting to us and what we want to learn about. So I've had all these burning questions, right? And especially for Yeshua. And then I just finally got through my bias and watched my first Bashar channeling. And if you've ever seen Daryl Anka channel Bashar, you know that he's a very kind of dominant masculine presence, and it comes off in a very direct way, but also very humorous if you really kind of pay attention. Very, very lighthearted, but in his species' own way. Although he explains that, just like with Yeshua, like any channel, the channeled entity coming through is ultimately now a third energy. It is the melding of the channeler and the channeled being. So really Bashar is saying you're not actually communicating directly with Bashar. You're getting the channeled version of me. So it's going to be restricted by Daryl's understanding of language and culture, and there are certain things that you can't experience the fullness of another being when it's a channeling. But it is a way to interact with a source of wisdom that is, as Bashar says, is ultimately just pointing us back to our higher mind, which is essentially what Yeshua is saying too, that we are ultimately guided by our oversoul, our higher mind, our Christed consciousness, and that's what's steering the ship. So when you speak to a channeled entity, they're just redirecting you to your own higher mind, to what you already know, because you already know everything. It's all folded up within you, not somewhere outside of you. Like this is something Bashar gets into a lot, is parallel universes, multiple realities and timelines, and that's a pretty difficult one to contemplate, honestly, as a human. But it's also, the way I see it is it creates endless opportunities and options for us. It's how we create such diversity and put so much creativity into this weird artificial state we're in. But yeah, I've been kind of on the rabbit trail of that, which is another reason I haven't done a podcast episode, because I've just been in the mode of ingesting and trying to process, and I didn't feel really like I had something to say. And honestly, like lining up interviews and stuff is a little bit, it's one of those things that like I let stress me out more than it needs to. I still have a really hard time being comfortable doing any kind of, it's really weird, but it's restricted to doing video chats. Like I get really nervous. I mean, I get kind of nervous meeting anyone for the first time or doing an interview, because I'm always afraid of coming off dumb. I always have plenty of fears about where I, where I let myself kind of fall apart in the education system and didn't learn, as much as I should have learned, and didn't read as much as I really wish I had read. And so I'm always afraid of coming off ignorant and stupid. But on top of that, there's just something about doing video calls that makes me so nervous, and I sweat through everything. It can be freezing cold and I'm pouring sweat. Even if I feel pretty relaxed leading up to the interview, it's bizarre. So there's some anxiety there that I'm still working through, and I really want to have people on the show. I really want to have other stories and diverse ideas, but it's almost like I need someone to help me with that. But I mean, this is a baby podcast. I'm so thankful for each one of you subscribers and listeners. It means the world. But if you've seen my numbers, you know that it's not like there's any money coming off of this. And that's not what I did it for. I didn't do this for income, but that is something I'm going to have to focus on at a certain point. I haven't had a job for over a year, and that was something that was not an option for most of my life. So this has been a weird period, but I'm also super thankful for it because I've grown the most in my understanding during this time. So I wouldn't trade it for anything, and it's worth it. It's worth not having any income doing this, putting in a lot of work and not having anything come back financially, because to me that's not what's truly a measure of success. Just money. I mean, you can make money from, I'm sorry if this is too crass, but I kind of think about this a lot. You can be like my wife and be in the education system and absolutely get your ass handed to you in terms of responsibilities and situations that are overwhelming and difficult, and get paid a extremely meager wage, while conversely, you can make a joke about spitting on someone's dick and be a millionaire with a podcast that I guess people listen to, and a cryptocurrency. I'm talking about the frickin' Hawk Tuah girl, which I never thought I would mention that on my podcast. I'm ashamed that I even referenced her, but to me, it's such a benchmark of the absurdity of what it means to generate a livelihood in this country, and the idea that there's some sort of stability with jobs and with financial opportunities for people. It's so erratic and wild, and just I know this is like old man yelling at the clouds kind of vibes, but I just think it's so out of balance and absurd that I think it's the reason I get so easily kind of bogged down and cynical, and it's the reason I have an absurdist sense of humor, because that's the only thing that really makes sense to me, because this world feels, I guess, equally as absurd as the absurdist comedy that I tend to ingest and kind of think about, which, if you knew me at all, you'd probably be like, this guy hosts a spiritual podcast? What? So, for example, I love the Pistol Shrimps radio podcast, and it's Matt Gorley and Mark McConville, two guys in LA. Matt Gorley, his girlfriend, now wife, Amanda Lund, she plays on she might still play on, I don't think she does. She played on a women's rec league basketball team named the Pistol Shrimps, and he would go to the games, and he got an idea. He had several other podcasts going at the same time, Super Ego and James Bonding, and what else? A couple other ones out there. And he had this idea for, what if me and my friend Mark, who he was doing other podcasts with, what if we go to these games and try and commentate on them like a professional broadcaster would, but instead of trying to do actual play-by-play, we're just sort of coming from the perspective of two guys who don't know very much about sports, or at least Matt Gorley doesn't, and just riff and do fun stuff. And I mean, that doesn't sound all that exciting, but their absurdist sense of humor is right in my niche sweet spot. And a lot of people see that stuff as a waste of time, silly, what's the point? To me, it makes this world make a little more sense, because to me, the absurd thing is how we run our healthcare system, our financial system, our workplaces, the hierarchies and power structures. To me, that's the absurd thing. And so absurdist stuff makes more sense to me than what people consider sane, normal, and rational. I hope that makes some sense. If not, then my apologies. On top of that, I have been completely obsessed with the onslaught of UFO sightings or UAPs. I'm not going to call them drones. That's what the media keeps calling them. There are a lot of misidentifications where it's an airplane and people think it's a drone, but there's also just a ton of orbs and other craft flying around that are being caught. I mean, I've seen hundreds of videos that are extremely bizarre. And I've seen in my own sky orbs moving around in ways they shouldn't. So, this is something Bashar gets into a lot, actually, is first contact. And he explains that first contact came through channeling. It came through, the Roswell crash and other visitations. I mean, humanity's been contacted by non-human intelligences for its entire existence. All right. So when we think of first contact, it's kind of a weird, skewed phrase because it really isn't it's relative. Right now, this is first contact for this current understanding of humanity. This, we haven't had a real direct contact in a long time, or at least not to the masses. So right now, we have the channelings out there as kind of a way to warm people up, the ones who are receptive to it. And of course, channelings are still very niche, just like the reason this podcast and NDEs and all these things can be very niche. They're starting to catch on. They're starting to gain traction, but I think now we're having a more direct opportunity to literally look up, to actually see what's going on in our skies, and to, a lot of people translate it as fear, like what do they want? Are they here to conquer us? If they were here to conquer us or destroy us, that would have happened a long time ago. So to me, this is part of what Bashar is talking about with first contact, and they really don't do this unless the species is at risk of annihilation or some sort of, passing a certain Rubicon that it cannot go back from. And I think humanity has definitely been at that precipice for quite some time now. And it's only getting more intense with AI and drones and modern warfare the way it is, and nukes and chemical warfare, all these things that are being floated with all these conflicts on a knife's edge. And that's why a lot of these UFOs or UAPs are spotted around nuclear facilities, because they're very interested in us not launching nukes or not doing anything reckless with nuclear material. It has an effect apparently through other dimensions when a nuclear bomb goes off. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just parroting what I've heard. But for those of you who are afraid or think that these are things to be feared, I don't believe they are. Bashar says this is the Pleiadians mostly in our skies. The Pleiadians are, I think I said Palladians. Pleiadians are a very familiar looking species to us. They are they're often referred to as the tall whites or the Nordic aliens because they look very much like a tall Norwegian person. And apparently some of them have incarnated on Earth, and we don't know the difference because they look like us, but they may, of course, act quite differently. However, they are part of the first wave of actual direct contact, because they will be a much easier buffer for us versus the mantis beings or the reptilian beings, who I don't think have our best interests at heart from what I understand. But again, all of that is about what you choose to embrace. Bashar talks about when you paint a negative picture of anything, even if it's like, oh, there's scary species out there that want to kill me. Once you put that negative energy out there, you may receive it back. But if you don't want to receive it back, don't put it out there. So don't look for the negative in situations, even if there is something that may be negatively charged. You can be aware of it, but don't put the fear out there that it's going to come for you. Because basically the way he's saying that physics work is that you won't get back what you don't put out. So if you put out love, you put out the intention and the trust that the universe is helping you and moving you forward and is here to protect you and keep you safe and happy, that's what you're going to experience. You may still experience some stray chaos, and have to adjust and deal with it, but you're largely going to be on the path of experiencing what you put out there. And I've seen this play out countless times in this human life with people I know, with myself. where when you change your mentality from only focusing on the negative to primarily focusing on the positive, you notice that a lot more positive things come back to you. Like one just real kind of, I don't know, casual example is I've been around a lot of people who say, I just can't stand all this drama in my life. There's so much drama. But they create the drama because they, on some level, feel like it's necessary. For whatever reason, that's an individual thing. But I've noticed a lot of the people who complain about too much drama tend to be dramatic and tend to feed into it and tend to continue narratives and tell many different people, these really exaggerated stories. And it's like, okay, you don't like it, but you're engaging in it pretty heavily, It's because you are putting that energy out there as an option available to you, that you see yourself as, I can be victimized by this, so instead of being a victim, I will control the narrative and I will control the drama and I will be the drama. So all that to say, I don't see the current, I'm not going to call it an invasion, but these craft are popping up all over the world. They're being seen in a lot of military bases. And that's why all these excuses from the government about, they're drones, they're hobbyist drones, they're military drones. Then why are they shutting down airports and shutting down military facilities, air bases? Wright-Patterson now has twice had incursions where they had to shut things down. Like, make that make sense to me, that's a hobbyist drone that somehow can't be taken down or identified. It just doesn't make sense. It makes sense if you understand that we are at the point where contact is necessary for us to turn a corner, because humanity is going down a lot of dark roads. And even if you're not focused on that, it is happening on a certain level. And, at a certain point, you can't be the meme of the little dog cartoon, with drinking coffee inside of the living room with the whole house on fire saying, this is fine. At a certain point, you have to be aware of the fire and go, I need to get away from the fire. And again, I'm not saying I have I know you're probably asking, what does that mean? I don't have an obvious solution for how do you distance yourself from the chaos of the world. I don't know if it's about distancing yourself or if it's about recognizing it as not relevant for your journey, as it's not a vibration you choose to resonate with. You can be aware of it, and you can choose not to put judgment into it and not see it as something to, rise up against necessarily, but just to ignore, to no longer resonate with, to no longer put energy into, to no longer identify with that struggle and that feeling. That's, for me, again, what's worked. For you, it may be different. And that's the point of this podcast. I don't know anything beyond what really is resonant within myself, what is working for me, what my higher mind is maybe guiding me towards, and that's going to be different for each person. So like Yeshua or Bashar or anyone else who's on a platform telling you something, I don't see myself as definitely as wise or enlightened currently as Bashar and Yeshua. I know that I am on a soul level or a spirit level at the very least, and that my point is anybody that you pedestalize is ultimately meant to guide you back to yourself and to your own direction, to your own excitement. That's something real quick I'll talk about here before I close. Bashar talks a lot about the formula, that this is the complete kit for how to tap into your higher mind and how to follow your true life path that you set out for yourself. And the formula is to act on your highest excitement in each moment, something that is actionable, something you can actually do in that moment, and to follow it through to its logical conclusion with no insistence on the outcome. So you might see something that looks like fun that you want to do, and you have the option and opportunity to do it. So you do that without planning out in your left-brained human mind exactly what's going to happen at the end of it or even in the middle of it. You just do it, and you embrace the moment, and you trust that when you follow your bliss, you are automatically led to the places that you need to be, to the journey that you set out on. That there is no planning it all out and having it all figured out and mapped out. That's a very human approach to life. We're meant to embrace this free-flowing, energetic, kinetic, creative, spark-like existence where we're moving from moment to moment, living our bliss and trusting that our higher mind is guiding us as long as we are surrendering to love and trusting in the moment that we are infinite, immortal, and that even if we die in the experience we chose to be in, it means nothing in the long run. It only increases our experiences and our expansion as a soul. If we had a truly realistic view of death and understood what it meant, we wouldn't fear it at all. In fact, we would probably be a little bit more apt to charge towards it, not in a necessarily self-destructive way, but in a way that we don't concern ourselves so much with, protecting every little tiny facet of our bodies and doing only low-risk activities. And, a lot of the things that I feel like I've been sort of conned into believing is the path, safety and comfort, mostly because my body is already so beat up at, 42 that I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I can handle too extreme of activities. But I've just had a fear of dying in a stupid way and embarrassing myself or something. And it's like, what? Who cares? I get it. I get why we care, but now that I have this different perspective that we are truly infinite spirits just focusing our consciousness from one place to the next. We're not even really reincarnating, as Bashar explains it. We're just a point of consciousness that is focusing on different experiences. And it's just a way for our human brains to translate it is that we reincarnate. But truly we don't reincarnate, we just shift our focus of consciousness. So when you leave your body, you don't die, you expand back into what you truly are. So there is no loss, there is no guilt, shame, or trouble to it at all. It's really just as natural a process as breathing, as anything else. And in fact, it's a gateway back to home. So it's really, again, nothing to be feared, something to actually look forward to in a way. On that note, if you don't hear from me by February, something might have happened. But I plan to be back on here in January with... I'm going to finally read a chapter from Pauline Edwards' book, Gateway to a New World. As you know, I had her on the last episode and just love talking to her. She's just such a positive force and really has the crux of the message hemmed up really well, with just focusing on loving and forgiving yourself first before you try and do anything else in the world. And how, that's a simplistic oversimplification of what she's saying, but essentially that you can't really move forward until you go inward and unlearn a lot of the things that have been programmed into your brain to feel about yourself and all the judgment and nonsense that is not representative of who and what you truly are. So it's really about just going inside, doing the work of loving and releasing all of the past traumas, fears, guilts, shame, whatever, and truly embracing and loving yourself in the way that you want to see yourself embrace the people you love in the world. Like it's putting that same love you have for wanting, the same energy you have for wanting things to be right with other people and with the world back into yourself, but doing that first and making that your primary focal point. That when you wake up in the morning, you are concerned about you first and where your heart's at and where your mind's at, instead of the world or other people, instead of getting on your phone and doom scrolling about everyone else's problems like I do. Thankfully, there are plenty of mornings too where I just get up and I recognize the gratitude of this experience. Yes, it hurts, it's painful, it's uncomfortable and weird and full of unpleasant moments, but it's expanding us. It's expanding our awareness and understanding of what and who we truly are. And eventually we don't have to keep doing this, period. This is all optional. You chose to be here. Apparently there are many, many souls waiting to get here that want to be on Earth, want to experience the dynamics of this experience. And, once you get here, the irony is you forget about all that, and then you're like, get me out of here, this place sucks. So hang in there if that's your vibe. It does suck sometimes. It is a rough world, but it's again about, are you seeing it as rough? Well, then it's going to be rough. Or are you seeing it as an opportunity to expand and to create and to have wonder and awe and love and to reimagine all of the things that you used to think about the world and yourself? To throw your beliefs and ideas just straight out the window and say, I don't need these. Whatever. Let me relearn everything today. Let me approach life like an innocent child. And, obviously there are practical limits with that. Don't get in your car and say, I don't know how to drive anymore. Let me pretend like I don't know what I'm doing and, go get on the freeway. I'm not trying to be impractical here. I'm trying to excite that, childish wonder within that wants to re-envision the world and your place in it, because you are actually shifting to the reality you prefer. You are your own universe. We are experiencing a merged, or what's called a collective consciousness. So we are overlapping and experiencing a lot of the same things, but we're also completely in our own unique universe. And ultimately it bends to our will and our passion. We just don't believe that we have that power, so we don't utilize it. It's like having a light switch nearby that's maybe covered up with a box or something, or taped over or painted over, and you don't see it, but it's there and it works. So it's a matter of just turning the light switch on and going, oh yeah, I created this universe for me to explore, to mold to what I desire, and I get to share it with all of these other beautiful souls and spirits. That doesn't mean that we're, again, disconnected from each other just because we're in our own actual universe. That's how awesome this whole experience is, because we get to co-create and experience things. It's not just about me and my universe. It's about what can you also build with other people, with other souls, with other minds. And so it just creates even more infinite of possibilities. And honestly, I just can't wait to find out what I already know. That's all this is. We're just forgetting what we already knew. You already know everything. You already have all of the answers inside of you, folded up inside of you. It's so hard to believe that. It's so hard to trust that, because we are so disconnected from it here. But I assure you, as much as I have red blood in my blue veins, that you are an infinite, expansive, all-powerful being made in the direct image of your source creator. That doesn't mean you are God, but you are equal to God in your capabilities, understanding, and creativity. But you also have the option to do things that God chooses not to do, which is to create the illusion of separation. That's something Source doesn't even engage with, because it can't even conceptualize or create the idea of other. It has to dream that, I guess. Don't ask me how that works, God dreaming versus being awake, or how we're dreaming in spirit, and why you would dream if you were an infinite being. I don't get a lot of that stuff, okay? Like, it won't make sense to me until I'm reunited with it, but I trust that that's how it works, because I've seen how the sausage is made, I've seen too much, and now this is where I'm at. So it could all change, in 5 years I could be on a very different track. I try to stay open. I try to be available for wherever my heart is guiding me, and wherever I see resonance of truth and love and people desiring to build a better world and to celebrate diversity, to celebrate each other's differences instead of finding them to be an easy point to divide on. We've done that for a very long time, and it is very, very stupid. Yes, that is a judgment, but it is very, very stupid. We are so much better than that. We are so much more capable of expanding ourselves into seeing each difference as an asset and not something to root out and divide and be separated from. So hold that light, hold that hope in your own heart that is the world you can create. And the more of us that believe we can create that world, then it actually physically manifests for all of us on a collective field. That's how we create the new earth and the new era, is through a collective desire for change. Yes, we're in our own universe, but we are so much more powerful when we are working together with other aspects of God, other aspects of ourselves. So I hope some of this made sense, and I'm going to end here, as I said 20 minutes ago. Good Lord. Thank you for, even being a part of this in some way, listening to my rants and raves, and I will have more guests on. I'll maybe read a few more chapters from some other books. Maybe at some point in the future I'll have Bashar or Yeshua on. We'll see. But I appreciate you nonetheless. I thank you for listening, and I will definitely be back sooner than later. So take care. Go in love and light. Look up in the sky. Watch for your friends. And namaste.